The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Welcome to the Influencer's Edge. This is the place where you come to get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques to leapfrog over the pack in sales, persuasion, and influence. Be sure you visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now sit back, tune in, and enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to the Influencer's Edge. As you know, this is the show that colors outside the lines, disconnects the dots, thinks outside the box, and asks the questions that would really piss your mother off. And today, look, I'm getting a laugh already from our guest. Our guest today is Mimi Nicklin. What you all should know is she got up early to be on the show because she is in where?
Malaysia.
As you could just hear, she has an irresistible accent that is melting me. She could read from the phone book. Well, they don't have phone books anymore. She could read Mary Had a Little Lamb, and I would just be swooning over that voice.
Wow. Thank you.
So I don't know if you'll be thanking me in 3 minutes. So welcome to the show. I'm going to read your bio, the tiny little print here. I'm going to have to put this on, but I guarantee you we won't get the bio. Get through the bio. We never do. All right. So with the goal of reconnecting 1 million people in empathy, now what in the world do you mean by empathy, and what's the distinction between empathy, sympathy, and compassion, if there is one?
Oh, there we go. Good question. We're right in. And as you said, it is very early. So now my brain is ready, right? It's ready to start the day. Thank you so much for having me. What do I mean by empathy? So fundamentally, empathy is about perspective taking. It's the ability to see the world and experience or an opinion from somebody else's point of view. So you might often hear people talk about standing in their shoes. I really love that you started with this question, because the reality is most people don't know what it is, particularly in the business world, and they do get it extremely confused with sympathy and compassion. So the best place to start. So fundamentally, sympathy is an emotion, right? It's pity. I feel for you. I feel sorry for you. Compassion is actually an action, right? So when you feel compassion, you act on something. The difference is that empathy is a skill set. So empathy is built into the prefrontal cortex. All but a very, very tiny percentage of the population is born with this pool built into their brain. It is a...
Hold on a minute. Wait. Challenge question.
Yes.
Everyone has mirror neurons where we can perceive what the other person is feeling. Do we not?
We do. Our ability to practice using them differs. So I always say to people that empathy is a choice. You choose to use it. And because it's a skill set pool, what that means is the less you use it, the less good at using it you become. So when you're not using empathy often, you get out the habit of listening. You're not really interested in the opinions of others. You are far more focused on yourself, your opinion, your way, your zone. Then those mirror neurons become used less often.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Okay.
Now, all right. So seeing the other person's perspective, having perspective versus perception, that's something that my CIA guests, I have people who have been in CIA and they've said one of the number one things they were taught is the difference between perception and perspective. Perception is what you see, but perspective is being able to take on the other person's view.
I agree, yes.
So is that what you're talking about when you talk about empathy?
Yeah, I think perspective is, as you just quite rightly said, and your friends from the CEI, we're talking about the ability to understand how someone else is seeing something. On occasion, that might be how they feel about something, because people often say to me, "But isn't this soft, Mimi? Isn't this a soft skill?" So I spend a lot of time saying, "Absolutely not. This is a hard skill, right? Hard to find, hard to master and practice, with really hard business results, which we can talk about." But given you sort of brought up intelligence, one of the organizations that uses empathy the most is actually the FBI. So the FBI use a lot of empathy when it comes to perspective taking in things like hostage negotiations. So when they want to shift or move or change a behavior in what is an extremely tough, dangerous scenario, they are going to divert to empathy as that skill set to help them change that current reality.
I've got to get that guy on my show, Joe Navarro.
Oh yeah, yeah,
My
yeah,
friend
yeah.
Chase knows him. I gotta get that guy on my show. He's a big dog.
He
Okay.
is.
And how do you distinguish it from discernment? Discerning what that other mind. So I'm dropping a lot of names here. Have you heard of my niece, Vanessa Van Edwards?
I don't think I have, but please tell me
Okay,
more.
Vanessa's writes a lot about reading people's cues, their
Ah, okay.
nonverbals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, so this is not a kissing cousin or in any way close to detecting deception or detecting other people's emotions. Well, you see where I'm getting at? I'm looking at discernment.
Mm,
I am also, in addition to the hard-nosed business person and the rest of it, I'm a healer, which is what most people don't know. And as a healer, I become an empath. I
yeah.
experience what my
Mm.
person who I'm working with is actually experiencing. So you're not talking about that.
No, I mean, I do get lots of questions around empaths, Paul, because empaths themselves reach out all the time, right? And ask me about it. It is the very far end of empathy, the very kind of I don't know, maybe top end, right? That, as you just said, there are some people who can quite literally feel the emotions of others, feel the pain of others, just feel others. My daughter is one of them. She doesn't know that yet because she's only 7, but she is.
Ah,
So she can go into a space and recognize things from a distance. I remember she was probably 2.5, so tiny little girl. And we were in a park. We were in Dubai, actually. And we were in a park walking, and this tiny little girl, my daughter, said to me, "Mummy, why is he so sad?" And I said, "Well, who? It's just me and her." And she said, "The old man." I said, "Well, which old man?" And there was an elderly gentleman on a bench quite far from us, Paul, that this tiny little girl, and with children, this is not in that, children are more interested in what's going on the swings or their lollipop, right? But this little girl is walking through a park and has been able to pick up on the emotion. She was right. He looked very, very down, of an elderly gentleman quite far away, far out of our direct sort of energy field. Pick up on him, notice him, recognize the emotion at 2.5, and then ask a question about it. So there are people like you, like her, who can feel the emotions of other people. But on the whole, when we're talking about empathy, particularly in the corporate world, and particularly in my work, because my work is to spread, convince, create more empathy in the world, not everyone can do that, right? But what everybody can do is take the perspective of someone else, understand, why is that person that I promoted doing less well after the promotion than before? Why has my 15-year client suddenly changed the way they want to work together? Why is that person around the boardroom table clearly so uncomfortable with this new policy I'm suggesting? So most of us can do that.
what state of mind? This is nothing in your biography, nothing in the questions. This is my genuine curiosity. So,
Yeah.
what state of mind do you have to be in order to exercise this ability
to be curious, because this part, as I look at your definition of empathy, part of it is the ability to step out of your own agenda for the moment at least and get very curious.
Mm.
So how do people who are not or not normally not typically curious because they're so hard-nosed and driven, how do they step out of their agenda? How do you train people like that to step out of their agenda and get curious about what the other person is experiencing?
I think it has to be something that's extremely intentional. As I said earlier, because it's a skill set, once you practice it, it does become easier, right? So the last three words of my first book were actually practice creates permanence, right? Never perfection, never aim for perfection, right? But it
Wow.
creates permanence, and it does. If you let's say you want to start getting up at 4 in the morning every day and going for a walk, right? The first week, the first 2 weeks, maybe the first three, it's just really hard, right? It's really hard to set the alarm, get up when it's dark, all of those types of things. But of course, the more you practice that, the more that becomes routine, the more your body kind of comes into that flow, the easier that habit becomes. That's the same with any habit or any skill set, right? Like playing golf or cooking or anything that you do in your life, right? The more you do it, the easier that becomes. Doesn't always mean it's easy, but easier, right? So that would be the same with showing curiosity, or fundamentally what you're talking about, which is listening, right? So if the backbone to empathy is curiosity, because you need to be curious about other people, then the path to that is to listen. Because if you're not listening, how are you ever going to show curiosity? How are you ever going to understand someone, right? So really what you're teaching to these leaders, to people who don't find this natural, is how to listen. Because Paul, we spend our lives telling people to listen, but we very infrequently teach people to listen. So that is fundamentally the shift here. And there are three really simple phases, really, that goes
That
through
is
it.
happen. By the way, you mentioned your book. What are the names of your two books?
So my first book is called Softening the Edge, and that is available in the US. It has been for a few years. My second book is called Empathy at Work, but that book is unfortunately not available in the US. But my third book comes out in 2 months, and it's called The
Exciting.
Connection Prescription, and that will be launched by a publisher in the US.
Say the name one more time. I spoke over you.
No worries. The Connection Prescription.
Ah. Oh, wow. That's a great title. We have to have you back on where I talk over you the whole episode as well.
Um, So, Paul, what I was going to say is that there are three really simple steps, right? The first is awareness, right? So, to bring awareness to you or your team or your organization of the power of this, of the reason that we need to be connected, the reason we need to listen. So, the awareness, which is a lot of what my work is. The second is around intention. So creating the intention in that team, setting the intention to do so, because as you quite rightly said, it's an active skill set, right? You have to want to do it, you have to commit to doing it. And then the third is accountability or measurement, because I believe what you measure manifests. So if you want your team to listen, if you want them to listen to your clients, to each other, you want them to show that curiosity, pretty much you need to give them a KPI to do it, right? Because if you don't measure things, they don't seem important. So awareness,
Hold
attention,
on. With all
measurement.
due respect, how do you give a KPI, uh, key performance indicator or index, for
Yes.
those of you who don't know the abbreviation, to
Yes.
something as what's the word? Not tenable as something as not concrete as listening. Do you understand
Mm.
what I'm saying? How do you measure that?
Yeah, it's an intangible. So I think that there's
Tangible. Thank you.
Yes, there's two. See, I told you I was awake, ready for the day ahead, right? I think that there's two parts of that. So the one way into that is to embed this type of behavior into values, and more businesses doing that. And it's amazing to me because when I started this journey, which was about 5.5 years ago, I never met a single person, a single client, right, who had empathy as a value in their business. But today I do, right? Especially banks, actually, loads of banks. But so the first way into measuring that is to have it as one of the values of the organization, which means that it becomes a behavior, it becomes a commitment, it becomes something that people are living by. The second way, which is, I'm sort of answering your question, two different parts of your question. When it comes to measuring it, empathy or curiosity or listening, these are not things you can measure. Did you do it today versus yesterday, right? They're things that you have to measure over time. But because the impact of it is measurable, so for example, you'll see morale go up, motivation go up, attrition go down, performance goes up, teamwork goes up, collaboration goes up, the long, long, long list, right? The outcomes of cultures that are more empathetic, that drive more belonging, connection, listening, do have measurable outputs, which means that you can track that and measure it over time, over 6, 12, 18, 24 months and beyond. And you will, and businesses do, measure when those, what you're calling intangible skills, right? Those human power skills, right? Of connection, of engagement, of relationships, as they go up, there will be hard outputs that also go up so that you can create the connection of that measurement.
I know you talk in your bio, which I never go through the bios, maybe 30% of the bios, 10% of the time. But I know you mention in your biography that there's an epidemic of loneliness. I think you way understate it. You said it was like 52% or something like that. I think what's the number you put on it?
It's 52%. Statistically, 52% of us are lonely. And that loneliness is now impacting the whole world. I mean, that if you think about that from a numerical point of view, and you kind of take the statistic and you're a little, open-minded with it, you're looking at billions of lonely people. But what the actual data shows is that 334 million people don't have a single friend.
I think
334 million.
I think when it comes to males, that number is higher. You would see that's overrepresented in males. I just am telling you, I have a lot of friends, and 80% of them are female. Just men don't bond. If people want to call me sexist, turn your head for a minute. You don't want to see this gesture. There you go. You missed it. I don't care. It's my show. But my experience as a man and also someone who participates in a men's group is we're extremely lonely. But it's an epidemic, not just in business, but I think in personal life. So I could see how this skill would apply to friendship and romance, dating. If you can show that you're genuinely listening to the other person and genuinely curious and ask questions that are triggered by what you're hearing and perceiving, not by what you've pre-programmed in your script, you're going to get a much better outcome.
For sure. I mean, actually, what's really interesting about what you just said, and this is not to promote my book. I'm just telling you because you brought it up.
I don't care.
But I'm not really a promoter. But
Promote.
what I will tell you is that in my new book, when I was writing that book, what I realized, to exactly your point, Paul, is that I need to write about a wider arena than leadership, right? Leadership's where I came from. It's a huge passion for me. The reason it's a huge passion, I think, is because we spend 5/7 of our life at work. So if we want to overcome the empathy deficit, the loneliness epidemic, starting at work is a good place to start, right? Because people spend so much of their lives there. Having said that, as I was writing, I kept having this sentence come to my mind, which eventually made it into the book, which is, how many marriages could we save? Right? I just kept asking myself that, right? If we were able to really widen our listening. And now to take this further, and now this is a real curveball. I didn't know I was going to bring this up, but it's connecting in my mind.
That's what I want.
Yesterday, I did the most amazing session, maybe of my career, because I did an empathy masterclass for either incarcerated or previously incarcerated people in the USA. So we had a 3-hour session with people, some of whom had been in prison for life or still were, to talk about the role of empathy. And the reason I bring this up to the conversation we're having is there was a moment in that session, I had to actually stop myself from crying. I didn't want to cry in front of them, but I was so profoundly, I don't know, moved or overwhelmed by this. This lady said to me very, very clearly, you know, she said to me, Mimi, I think the reality is that had we had this class, right, had we had empathy in our lives, if we had known what it was, we wouldn't have committed our crimes. And I was like, whoa, right? So not just from how many marriages can we save, but actually how much of life could we change, Paul? If these skills, and you started at friendship, I took it to marriage, and now we're taking it to civility, right? If more people understood what the skill is, knew how to connect with each other, could understand the other, and were being brought up with this ability, because as I said earlier, we've got it, we just need to practice it. I think we might be able to change the world.
You brought up a word, civility is what I think you said. Is that correct? I
Yes.
find more and more, this is, some people say I'm a cynic. I say, no, I'm developing better and better discernment. And as I interact with people in the business world and widen my scope of people I interact with, my discernment is that many people lack common courtesy and civility. They don't have to be sociopaths or criminals or any of that. They just have never had it modeled for them, or this device has destroyed their focus, so they can't do it. That and a lack of competence. Like people are struggling from they're useless and they're struggling to be incompetent. Excuse my cynicism.
No, I
But
think your
that's
cynicism is shared by many people. The statistics show that there are 400, I mean, I actually don't know how they measured this, I have to be honest, but I read it in Forbes, that there are 400 million acts of incivility a day in the workplace. So just those micro and some not so micro, but those micro or macro moments of like you're talking about, right? Just a lack of awareness of respect, of treating people with fairness, of just being a decent human being, right? And it's increasing all the time.
crazy. Now I will dive back into
Go,
your
go, go.
application.
Let's see how far we get.
I know. Let's keep going. All right. Mimi is a top 5 rated podcast host of the show. Mimi you love it. Very clever. You're a smart marketer. She's omnipresent. Wow. Are you omnipotent and omniscient? Because if you are, I've got some wish lists for you. She's omnipresent in the media, including recently appearing live on the BBC to 85 million people. Wow.
Yeah,
Having
that was
recently appeared on stage with Bill Gates. Wow. I'm not going to get into what's he like. He strikes me as being on the spectrum. Nothing wrong with that. She's an experienced executive coach and the Globe's leading thought leader advocating for the movement to create more empathy in the world. She's trained over 18,500 professionals. You don't look old enough to have trained 2,500. So how you claim to have trained that many, I don't know.
gone up now. We just changed that bio, like, you know, updated it, and we're just over 20,000 now. So I'm super, I'm super proud because I was in Oman last week and we trained another 1,800. So yeah, it is rising, right?
Did you
The
say
number
you
of
were in Omaha?
in Oman in the
Okay,
Middle East.
good, because there's nothing in Omaha.
I've never been, but I'll let you know if I go.
You know what? You don't know that you've never been because if you went, you forgot it. There goes my listeners down on the farm. Let's see. In your best-selling book, Softening the Edge and Empathy at Work, you argue that empathy is not just a soft skill, but a business imperative. We've gone through that. As leaders navigate the complexity of today's market, how can they effectively integrate empathy into the strategic decision-making processes without compromising on efficiency? Aha. All
Mhm.
right. So how do you balance empathy with efficiency, Mimi Nicklin?
Mm. Mm.
Top 5
Yikes.
rated podcast host.
You make it really fun.
Currently in Malaysia.
So the reality is actually that empathy drives efficiency. They're actually completely connected. We are a pro-social species. So we do better when we are together, right? When we are connected, when people acknowledge us, to your point earlier about these little acts of incivility, when we feel seen, right? And you walk through life and people recognize that you exist, we do better. And the data will show us that in many, many ways, that is true. So for example, 89% of people will say that they will work longer hours out of choice for an empathetic boss, right? So maybe you can resonate with that, right? Sometime in your career, a boss that you really respect, like you have a good relationship, they listen to you, you're interested in them. That boss comes to you and says, hey, Mimi, it's Friday night. Could you just stay a little bit longer tonight? I really need help to finish this PowerPoint for the board. You're going to be like, sure, I can do that, right? Versus a boss or a leader who never listens, is not interested. It's all about him or her. You don't have a relationship. And when that person comes and says, hey, could you stay? You're like, gotta feed the cat, right? Like you're not going to do it.
You have to feed the cat. She's
There you go.
she's
You
in
can't
the other room
have
judging.
I have a sixth sense for your cat.
She's in the other room judging me.
There you go. So, so what the data will show us is that the more connected we are to the cultures that we work within or that we exist within, as that belonging goes up, right? And loneliness, we touched on earlier, goes down, many levels of efficiency go up. So people work longer hours, people are more creative and innovative. So innovation actually goes up by 48% in empathetic cultures, right? Because self-censorship declines. So when I feel that I'm sitting around a table,
Whoa, that's gold.
listen,
I
go
hit
on.
the pause, pin, repeat button. So say that again.
So when you are within an empathetic culture, a culture that listens, self-censorship goes down. And that is because for anyone that works in HR, psychological safety goes up. So when I feel you're going to listen, I am more able to commit and give innovation, creativity, brave decisions, even strategic thinking.
It's
So
an incredible
it's
skill to have.
It is. It is.
That, along with being vulnerable first, really opens a person up. Because one of the other things in my experience that create safety emotionally for the other person is when you're vulnerable first. I think everyone wants to be vulnerable, but they want the other person to go first. And no one will do it. And so people wind up separated from each other. There's something else that occurs to me as we were speaking. I'm a meditator. I've been meditating since 2006.
Okay.
I think that being able to listen to other people requires that you turn down the chatter in your own mind. Because if you're yammering and thinking about what you're going to say next, you can't receive the other person, even if you truly have the intention to. So,
Yes.
do you include any trainings or teachings in that on how to quiet down your own internal yakety, 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 yak?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I fully agree. I think you're absolutely right. That is what we need to do. I always ask people to consider, are you listening to understand or are you listening to reply? And the difference is what's going on in your brain. If you are
Ding,
really
ding, 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 ding. Pause, pin, repeat. Are you
are you
listening
listening to
to,
understand,
or
are you listening to reply?
ding, 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 ding? Great. That's going in the show notes. Keep going.
Yeah, and it's one of my biggest questions. I ask it on like every stage I walk onto, because it exactly how you just responded, like, hang on, tell me that again, right? It's such a, I don't know, profound statement because so many of us are not listening. So to your question, do I teach meditation? No. I do meditate, not as much now as I did at other points in my career. But I do teach other ways for people to ensure that they are in the room. I teach a lot of work around presence, for example, because you can't expect someone to talk to you if you're, like you said, on your phone or distracted or hungry or really tired or any of those other human realities, because presence is about being within, in that space with them.
So remarkably true. And nowadays, with these damnable devices, it's so rare to see. That's La Lele there. People can't see. I actually go to a restaurant frequently for breakfast.
Hmm.
and I see a married couple and they're always there looking into their phones rather than facing each other.
Yes.
I've had people, I remember seeing a mother crossing the street with her baby in the pram, as you would say it, right?
Yeah.
Pushing the pram. And she was looking into the phone and wasn't realized that the light had changed. And I yelled, "You stupid asshole. You're going to kill your child." And I just lost it completely. But yeah, I can absolutely see how this skill gets harder and harder to truly listen,
Mm.
not to get a reply, but to listen to understand, and how it would be such a remarkable tool across the board, not just in business, but in relationships, in friendships, in building connections. And you're right, we are social creatures. We're hardwired to be social creatures. We don't do well when we're hardwired to co-regulate.
Yes.
That's why it's
Yeah.
more important than ever to learn to self-regulate as society gets more and more isolated. This has been amazing. As I promised you, we are at our time now. You're gonna come back. I know you're gonna come back.
Love to.
Don't make me go to Malaysia and chase you down. That's where you're.
Oh, but you'll like it here. We have lots of cats.
Do you?
Yes, the Malaysians love cats.
As the blue plate special or as pets?
No, as pets.
All right. All right. So Mimi, my audience wants to stay in the conversation with you. I know it already.
Okay.
So how do they do that? First of all, name your two books that are, or what is the book that's available?
The book that's available is called Softening the Edge. And
What's
the
your
book
new
that
book?
is coming is called The Connection Prescription. And it will be available from July in the USA.
Why don't you have your own TV show? Your camera, the camera loves you. You're incredibly charismatic. You know your stuff. You would probably be a fantastic interviewer. Why don't you have your own TV show, Mimi Nicklin?
I
Host of You, who soon will have me as a guest.
I don't know, Paul Ross. Would you like to give me one? If you know someone, let me know.
Let me look into my Hollywood connections and get your show.
I would
Okay,
love
because
that.
you really would make a fabulous TV host. No, you wouldn't, because you would have to dumb it down, and that would be a sin. For you to dumb yourself down would be a sin. All right, Mimi, stay with us
Okay.
for a little brief green room chat. Once again, audience, do I bring you the best guest or what? So thanks. Tune in next time. And to the hostile alien armada in your cloaked spaceships hovering just outside the Earth's atmosphere, remember, eat the Canadians first. We'll see you on the next episode.
The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Thank you for tuning in to the Influencer's Edge, where you get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques so you can leapfrog over the pack in sales, influence, and persuasion. Remember to visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com to enjoy even more great episodes like this one. We look forward to seeing you again on the Influencer's Edge Show.